Good evening, everyone, and welcome to New York Buddha Dharma. My name is John Baker, for the record, and we have been working through a document called The Profound Treasury of the Ocean of Dharma. This is a 3-volume set of a compilation made from talks given by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche over the course of 13 years at a program that he taught every year called Seminary, Vajradhatu Seminary, where he would take a number of his students into retreat to practice and study for a period of 3 months. And the numbers varied from maybe 100 up to, I think, as many as 250 in some years. And these teachings were digested, these talks, into the 3-volume set that we're working through. And we're in volume number 1, which is on the Hinayana. I'll explain what that means. And the Tibetan Buddhist teachings are divided into different levels, you might say. They're called yanas. Yana literally means vehicle in Sanskrit. And the first or foundational yana is called the Hinayana. The second one is called the Mahayana, meaning greater yana. And then the third and last is called the Vajrayana, meaning adamantine or indestructible vehicle. And then each of these has subdivisions. But we are on the Hinayana teachings here, and we're not really distinguishing between there are 2 main subdivisions of the Hinayana, but we're just basically treating it as one. And we're up to a talk entitled Cutting the Root of Samsara. Samsara is a Sanskrit word which literally means circle. And in Tibetan it's korwa. And the idea is that for confused people who are suffering, who are unenlightened, they continually circle through one attempt to be happy after the next. And it's a continual circling. It's like the image is, there's an image that is used, a symbol of a snake biting its own tail. You never get to any kind of resolution. It just goes around and around and around. In fact, what happens is that samsara is based at its core on the problem that we feel that we are looking for a better way to be, to live, and that this search for a better way is literally endless. That it's kind of like, when you were a child and you got your Christmas toys, if you got Christmas toys or your Hanukkah toys or whatever it was, and then after a little while you found them just moldering in the closet and you'd gone on to other desires. And that's really the problem with samsara, is that nothing ever fundamentally satisfies, and really the attempt to find some better way to be is never-ending. It's almost self-sustaining. And so beings circle endlessly, looking for a better way to be. Now, as long as one is feeling dissatisfied in this way, which is the fundamental meaning of suffering, dissatisfaction, wanting some kind of improvement, there are different styles in which this manifests. And these are articulated in the Buddhist teachings, these different styles. They're prototypes for styles of confusion and suffering, of styles of pursuing this search. And there are basically 3 main divisions. They're called dhatus in Sanskrit. And one is called the arupa dhatu, meaning the formless realm. The second is called the rupa dhatu. Rupa means form, so it's the realm of form. Dhatu sort of means realm or sphere. And the third, and the one that really most of us live in, is called the Kamadhatu, meaning the world of desire. And the Kamadhatu is itself divided into 6 subdivisions, and these are from top to bottom, all of them equally benighted, but some having more pleasure and less pain than others, and all equally temporary. But from the top to the bottom, there's the God realm, which is the realm of pleasure. Gods live in a world of extreme pleasure, and everything they see is beautiful, everything they hear is music, everything they smell is perfume, everything they eat is ambrosia. Beneath that is the realm of the jealous gods. These are people who are not gods, but would like to be gods, and in fact are on they're hell-bent to breach the walls of heaven, storm the gates, and become gods themselves. And you meet people like this who are they're warrior-like in one way or another, in whatever realm, whatever sphere of endeavor they've chosen. And so, for instance, you might meet some really cutthroat people in Wall Street who are storming the gates of their particular version of heaven, which is extreme wealth. And they think that to be extremely wealthy would be heavenly. And so they're fighting like mad, and there are people who are very unscrupulous in their pursuit of that. But you find it in many different spheres, this pursuit of heaven. And they're called jealous because they can see heaven, these jealous gods. They can see the gods. And in fact, there's a tree in the normal rendition of the God and jealous God realms. There's a tree that grows within the realm of the jealous gods, right next to the wall that separates them from the God realm. And the fruit hangs over into the God realm. So the gods enjoy the fruit, which really pisses the jealous gods off, because it's their tree. They figure it's kind of like they're doing all the work, cultivating the tree, but the gods reap the benefits. And then beneath that, there's the human realm. And the human realm is the realm of passion. It's sort of the realm of enjoying the pleasures of life, the fine bottle of wine, the lovely love affair, and a reasonable amount of intelligence. But you're not on the warpath the way the jealous gods are, nor do you have the extreme pleasure the gods have. The gods, what characterizes the gods, basically, is that they think they've got it made. They're convinced. They know it. There's nothing more. And they really can't relate to the suffering of the lower realms. It's sort of the Marie Antoinette mentality, let them eat cake. I can't really relate to suffering until they fall, and they will fall eventually into the lower realms. And then beneath that is the animal realm. And now we're into what are called the lower realms. These are the realms of increasing suffering. And the animal realm is characterized by stupidity, sort of a lack of subtlety and a lack of being able to distinguish one thing from the next. And, dogs have a very limited range of response. They can lick something, jump on it, pee on it, screw it, eat it, but they're not going to discriminate between that, bottle of Chateau Lafite and something else, the way humans do. And then beneath that is the realm of the hungry ghosts. And these are beings who live in extreme hunger. It doesn't matter what they've got, they feel hungry. They feel deprived, and no matter how much they can consume, they can't fill their bellies, satisfy their appetites. So it's the realm of poverty mentality. And then beneath that is the worst place to be, which is the hell realm. And this is the realm of anger, hatred, because one feels one's very existence is threatened. And there's extreme heat and fear and fury and pain, and a lot of pain in the hell realm. And they say what samsara is that one circles endlessly through these 3 realms. Now what characterizes each of these realms is basically a dream. It's a dream about I and other. And we tell ourselves stories about our lives that are characterized by these different styles. So there are 3 ways to take the realms. One is that we are actually, all of us in this room, anybody listening to this video, are human beings. We're born as human beings, as opposed to being born as animals like your dog or your cat or your goldfish or whatever. And you can believe it or not, but I mean, the Buddhist teachings say there are actually beings who inhabit the other four realms as well. And we're not even getting into the realm of pure form and the formless realm. Those are purely mental states. Those are trance states that are achieved through extreme concentration. They're sort of the super God realms, and they're very dangerous because you get stuck in them, and they're still created and will eventually come to an end and result in huge disappointment. So each of these realms is involved with a story. So, if you're in the hungry ghost realm, you're a human being, maybe born in this body, but you could have the mentality of any one of the realms. So you might be a human being who's born in the hungry ghost realm, and you feel like everybody else has what you want. And you're a poor little impoverished person. Perhaps you've met people like this. You find them here and there. People who just feel fundamentally impoverished. And around you, they feel like, they make you can see in their eyes that you're wealthy by comparison to them. And they're envious of you and wish that they could be like you. Or there might be people who are gods, human beings born in a human body, but they have the mentality of a god. And these mentalities in this style go on for long periods of time, perhaps whole lifetimes, or months and years at least. And so a god, you might meet a god in a human body, and there are people who are very powerful in one way or another. They're arrogant. They can't really relate to the suffering of others. They are absorbed in pleasure, the pleasure that they feel is theirs, that they're entitled to, and so forth. So each of these realms, you see, a human being can have the mentality of a realm, even though they're born in a human body. And then finally, the third level at which the realms operate is that you could be, let's say, a human being with the mentality of a hungry ghost, feeling really hungry all the time, but suddenly somebody does something to you, and you are furious, and you are plunged momentarily into the hell realm. And that's the third level at which the realms occur, in momentary flashes. Or somebody comes up and they give you a huge gift, and for a moment, you have extreme pleasure, and you're experiencing the joy and the pleasure of the God realm, even though you're a human being with the fundamental ongoing mentality of a hungry ghost in this instance. So the realms operate in these three ways. And this is samsara, because what happens is, as long as one is not enlightened, and we'll come to what that means, one circles endlessly through these realms, from lifetime to lifetime, each in the three realms, in each of these three styles. So one minute you might be, in the course of a day, you might experience the God realm, and you might experience the hell realm, and some other realms in between, depending on what's going on with your life in the course of a day. And in the course of a life, you might have the mentality of a jealous God, let's say, go out there and be storming the gates of heaven, and then, maybe you're going to get what you wanted, and then you feel like you're in heaven, and you've moved again until heaven wears out, and heaven does wear out. They say that when the gods get old, they begin to smell, and it's like they begin to develop body odor, which no god has in their prime. And other gods begin to see that they're about to fall, and they shun them. And this god that's about to fall is ostracized. And when they fall, when they leave the god realm, when they fall from it, in one way or another, say like a movie star who gets old and is no longer in demand, and maybe even loses their money. I'm making it up, but that might be it. Then the disappointment is so great, and the sense of loss is so great, that individual can be plunged into the hell realm in a fury of anger and sorrow. So the realms are very dangerous, and this is why samsara is called a circle, because you circle endlessly through the realms, seeking pleasure in all these different styles. So this chapter was called Cutting the Root of Samsara. Now, what the root of samsara is karma. What is karma? Karma is the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are and what our life is and what our life is all about. We have some fundamental stories, we have momentary stories. These stories, if you could piece together the fragments, they make some coherent whole, like a movie or like a TV show that you would watch. But on the whole, we experience them in fragments throughout the course of our day. You can, if you watch your mind as you walk down the street and see what you're telling yourself, you can begin to identify the different realms in the stories that one tells oneself. And this is the way in which we experience confusion and suffering, telling ourselves these stories. And what it means to be bound by the chain of karma is that we are enslaved to the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are, what our life is, what our problems are, what our hopes and fears are, what we're afraid of happening, what we hope will happen, what we're going to pursue, what our failings are, what our virtues are. These stories keep us bound into a particular style of action, pursuing particular ends, avoiding other things. It's a good question to ask yourself, what is it I can't be with in my life? Each one of us has things that we've learned in the past that we are shunning and avoiding, things I can't be with, a particular kind of maybe hurt or failure that you experienced in the past that was particularly painful and that you don't want to have repeated. And every time you even get near it, much less experience that same thing again, you're out the door. You leave. So we're enslaved to these stories that we tell ourselves. And each one of us has our own particular versions and styles of them. This is what's meant by the chain of karma. These stories have a particular structure and characteristic. We experience them in fragments throughout the day, throughout the years and months of our lives and the weeks and days. We just have fragments of them. You usually don't experience sort of a coherent story from beginning to end. But they're all there, and they have a particular character, some particular qualities and characteristics. So, for instance, one of the main characteristics, of course, is that there is a hero or a heroine. Who can that be? It's moi. Each one of us is the hero or the heroine of our story. And it's kind of like the Perils of Pauline. It was this story that was very popular back in the 19th century and before, where Pauline is tied to the railroad tracks and the train is coming, and will the hero save the heroine before she gets run over by the train? And we're constantly living these kinds of dilemmas and threats to our lives. It's a constant series of challenges and threats and promises that we are pursuing. So we are the heroes, the heroines of our own story, and we are on an arc. We're on an arc towards the object of our desire, and we have many of them, and each one of them constitutes kind of a separate sub-story, and we are going to go and get the object of desire, or we're trying to avoid that thing that we don't want, which is kind of the same thing. We're heading to a state that is void of that threat, which is another object of desire. And we're on this course, and there are really two possibilities for what can happen on the arc towards the object of desire. One is that you get it. If you get it, that story is over. That's it. On to the next story. Right? Because the main thing is that we want to be occupied. We need to be busy. This sense of I constantly has to have an occupation. Otherwise, it stops being here. There is no I. I is fundamentally dependent on this project. So if you get the object of desire, that story's over and you move on to another. If obstacles arise, then you've got challenges and you have to overcome them. And it's the old story of Pauline, will the hero manage to save her, or will the villain keep her tied to the tracks and the train will kill her? So those are really the possibilities, and we have lots and lots and lots of these stories going. We are enslaved to them. We are the dreamers, the protagonists of these stories. And so we're on a path to earning more money, finding more love, being healthier, living longer, being happier, finding entertainment, whatever it might be. Lots and lots of them. Being respected, becoming famous, eating good meals, getting rich. Who knows? All these different objects of desire that each one of us in our own particular style might pick and pursue. This is samsara. This is the wheel. And you see it, perhaps you've seen there's a heuristic, a symbolic representation of this. It's a demon, and he's holding a wheel, and that is the wheel. This wheel is samsara. And on that wheel are the 6 realms, among other things. There are a lot of other things on it too. And the demon who's holding it, and he's biting it in his teeth like this, and he's got claws and fangs. He's Yama, the Lord of Death. Because as long as one believes in one's own personal existence, then you are subject to birth and death. And you are going to have to suffer in Yama's clutches. You will die, and he will take you away from this life and deprive you of your body and your loved ones and your possessions and this very world. So really, the whole thing depends, you see, on the constant telling of these stories. Where did these stories come from? This is the way karma works, or the way it is created. There is a structure to neurotic mind. We're not talking about enlightened mind. Enlightened mind is wide open. It has descriptors, but it has no particular structure. It's just open. It's here all the time. It's our fundamental nature. It's our ability to be here and be present in this room right now. To hear this voice, to see the walls, to feel the temperature of the room, to feel your bottom on the cushion, all these things. It's automatic, it's clear, it's full of light and color. It has a quality of knowingness that you don't even have to try to know. It's always here. It's like the blue sky that is always up there. Clouds may cover it from time to time, but you know that those clouds come and go. Those clouds are the mental events that come and go through our minds. They come, they go. And these mental events, as they come and go, tell stories. That's what mental events are. They have particular qualities to them: love, hate, a story of being hurt or proud or whatever. Now, neurotic mind, which is embodied or encapsulated in all these mental events, has 8 aspects. First of all, one fundamental feature of neurotic mind is that it believes in I and other. That's just a thought, I. It's a thought that occurs from time to time. And so is other. And then it's gone. And when it's gone, there's just this, open space. But when it occurs, the way it occurs is typically in the middle of all this space full of flashing lights and colors and no particular ego. Suddenly there is a figure that emerges, and there's a figure in the ground. So suddenly there's Isabel. And everything else recedes into relative unimportance, because that person then is the main focus, that figure. The presence of that figure, that thing there, implies the existence of a perceiver here and a relationship. If that's there, I'm here. It's just an act. It's a statement that takes place from time to time, and then it's gone. But while it's happening, it's full of the anxiety of what's our relationship? How do I keep this going? How do I be happy in this relationship? There are supposedly 8 aspects to this relationship. The first 5 have to do with the 5 senses. that I can have this kind of a relationship of I and other in 5 ways: sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. Is that right? 5, sound, smell, taste, touch, 5. The 6th one is mental, purely mental, that I can be aware of my thoughts, my emotions, my mental events. So there's this constant I-other relationship of the mind that perceives and the other that it perceives, the perceived. And that's 6. Sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and mind. We'll come back to the 7th. The 8th aspect of this setup is the fact that it's called the storehouse, the alaya consciousness, the alaya vijnana. Alaya means storehouse, among other things. It also means some other things. But in this context, it means storehouse. And what it's referring to is the fact that your experiences in life, you have an experience, and that experience is stored as a memory in your mind. You know, later, Freud, and especially Anna Freud, developed the idea of the unconscious, and that memories are stored in the unconscious. Same thing. But the alaya, with that notion, took place, was sort of appeared in India in about the 6th century A.D. So what happens is that you have an experience, and the memory of it is stored in your alaya as what is called a bija, a seed. Now what it means is this, that nobody here is particularly thinking about their mother until I say the word. And suddenly mom pops to mind, because something in the external world keyed a memory of you, of her, in your alaya, in your storehouse, and the memory is activated. That's what happens. Seeds sprout when they encounter something in the external world that triggers them. Also, they can just be kicked out, as when you're dreaming. You might go to sleep and there's nothing to stimulate you, but you sort of, the alaya is throwing out lots of seeds, and you have dreams. You might have a dream of your mother. So it takes place in both ways. Or it might happen during your conscious life, that suddenly mom pops to mind, is just for no reason at all, one thing or another. So the alaya is where all these memories are stored, and they're lying there in embryo as seeds ready to sprout. Finally, the 7th consciousness. These are all different aspects, you see, of this mind. They don't really exist as separate things. And the 7th one is what's called the defiled consciousness. What that means is that it is the aspect of our mind that looks back at the alaya. You sense the alaya. The alaya is these seeds that are back there, all these memories, perfume the alaya. That's what it's called, vasana in Sanskrit. And what that means is that all your memories sort of perfume who you are. You know, I may not know what your specific memories are, but I can sort of sense a particular style to you, and you know it. You know, you've got a particular style. Maybe your relationship with your mother was loving. Maybe it was hateful. Who knows what? Maybe it was traumatic. Maybe it was delightful. And that perfumes your alaya. It sort of creates a style of your personality, your neurotic personality. And what the 7th consciousness does is it senses that alaya. It looks back on it and says, that's me. That's who I am. That history. That person who was 7 years old with, you know, mom and dad and living in Oshkosh and all the things that you can call to mind. So that's the 7th. But karma really takes place in the 8th, in the alaya. And the way it works is that you have an event, and the memory of it is stored in the alaya, the story of it, that event, until, and you don't think about it anymore, until something triggers it, and it comes to life and colors the way in which you see the immediate moment, and the way in which you respond to it as well. So the example I made up years ago for this, and so anybody can make one up. I'd love to get a new one. A mother is walking down the street with her child, and she's window shopping. And the child may be 3 or 4 years old, sees a dog, and they want to meet the dog, so they go up to the dog, and the dog bites it. and the child is traumatized. The mother saves the child, takes it away. The child recovers, and over the months, the memory of that dog disappears and goes subconscious in the alaya. The child's not thinking about it anymore when it's playing with its toys and relating with other people and the mother and family and all that. Until one day, the child is walking down the street again with its mother, and it sees a dog in the distance. And the mother is window shopping, and she doesn't notice. And the child immediately, that seed in the alaya springs to life, and the child's frightened because it remembers that previous traumatic incident. That story springs to life. And the mother, noticing it, approaches the owner of the dog, determines that it's friendly, and brokers a meeting between the child and the dog. And this dog is friendly. It licks the child's face, it jumps up on it, plays, and the child learns that not all dogs bite. Some dogs are really friendly. And that puts a new seed in the alaya. And so the alaya is being perfumed. First it was perfumed with this purely aggressive dog. Now it's perfumed with a mixed picture of dogs. Some dogs bite, some dogs are friendly. So the third time the child meets a dog, it'll have this qualified response. It won't be like the second time. And it won't be the naive response, approach of the first time. And this is what we do through life. And we bring forward these stories, these memories, in ways that are totally inappropriate, as the child did when it saw the second dog and assumed that it was going to bite it like the first dog did. And you can see it in yourself. You sit on the subway and you look at people in this room, and you look around, and we have impressions of who each person is and associations and feelings toward them based on past association. Sometimes, you can meet somebody and you have a bad impression of them, and it's totally inaccurate. Totally inaccurate. I remember I was doing a coach training once, and we were in a room with about 20 people, and we were told we had to do this exercise of it was the "what is it you can't be with" exercise, actually. And I had been looking around, and I saw a particular woman, I had seen over the course of the hours and maybe even a couple of days that I'd been in this training, who just didn't appeal to me. She wasn't my type of person. I hadn't spoken to her, but she had too much makeup, too much jewelry. I just wasn't my style. So sure enough, who am I paired up with? Her. And we sit there, and I'm thinking, uh-oh. So we determine who goes first. She goes first. And she says, what is it you can't be with? What she can't be with, she looks at me, and she says, I have a dog that I love. Its name is Fifi. And she's looking at me like this. It's a poodle. Like she knows what I'm going to be thinking. Fifi, a poodle, really? And she's just looking straight at me. And then she says, I really love my dog. And she said, and basically what it came out was that she was, 65 years old. She had never had children. And she and her husband, she'd been married all this time, and she loved this dog. The dog was her child. And what she couldn't be with was she couldn't go to social situations like cocktail parties. She avoided them. Because inevitably somebody she didn't know would say, oh, hi, my name is so-and-so, you're married, do you have any children? The question that horrified her, she hated it, because she would say no to this woman who was questioning her, and she could see in the woman's eyes immediate pity or immediate regret that she had asked the question, that because she felt that the woman was seeing her as less than. And so she avoided those situations. That's what she couldn't be with. We became very good friends. And we kept up a correspondence. She moved to Florida, and we kept up a correspondence for a number of years. I've lost track of her. Just goes to show our preconceptions. I mean, how many times, isn't it wonderful when they're exploded, those preconceptions? You have some preconception of a person that is aggressive, it's hateful, it's not, whatever it might be, and then they just explode it somehow. and your prejudice is demolished. This is karma. The way in which we're bound into these stories that arise inappropriately. Anna Freud explored this a lot when she talked about defense mechanisms. Defense mechanisms, you see, are things that protect us, like that child who was protecting himself against that angry dog that he had experienced. But they're inappropriate because now the dog was friendly. And so its fear was unwarranted. We do this all the time in life. It's very, very crippling and profound, the way in which we walk through our days, seeing the world through a veil of preconception, judgment, good and bad, past stories. This is karma. This is the karmic chain, our enslavement to these stories. So this chapter is called Cutting the Root of Samsara. And what it means is cutting the karmic chain. That's the way in which you begin to get out of samsara. And how do you do it? By coming present. By practicing what Trungpa Rinpoche here is calling mindfulness. But when he talks about mindfulness, it's something a bit different than what it's often described as being today. Mindfulness is a word that has assumed a wide range of meanings. And it doesn't mean simply calming down and being aware of an object. What it means is dropping one's preconceptions, one's judgments of good and bad, should and shouldn't, of seeing the world and the person that you're sitting across from as it is, as they are. And it means coming back to this present moment, awake, just completely here, aware of this space that we're in, full of colors and sounds and smells and tastes. When one does that, comes back fully into the present moment, I and other has disappeared. They're just thoughts. And they evaporate momentarily, even if it's only for a moment. He calls this the gap. It's the gap in the I-other story. And in that gap, there is just this open space. And one can appreciate this phenomenal world as it truly is. And when you do that, you're cutting the chain of samsara and cutting the root of samsara and beginning to step out of it. And he says that this ability to do this, you see, this is practice. This is what we do when we meditate, is we're practicing two things. We're practicing becoming aware of the extent to which we're lost in thoughts, preconceptions, stories. Because most people don't even know. We're so fixated on these stories that we just wake up in the morning and we start thinking, well, what am I going to do today? And I'm worried about this. And gosh, I want to make a cup of coffee. And and on and on. And we're completely lost in a train of thought until something, one thing or another, wakes us up. There's a gap. It might be a horn going off on the street. It might be us sitting down to meditate. It might be us spilling a cup of coffee on our leg, like that. It might be a sneeze. You sneeze and whoo, suddenly you're back, if only for an instant. And the best way to do it is intentionally, through practice. That you become aware, on the one hand, of the thought that you're having, and on the other, of the gaps between them, of this open space of awareness that we can always come back to. And he says that what we do is I'm going to read this, knowing how karma begins right at the beginning seems to be the key point. So you know how it begins? It begins every time you fall into some story that is arising out of the alaya. And they come out all the time. And then he says, we begin by planting seeds of memory in our alaya consciousness. What we are trying to do in shamatha is to tackle that level of alaya consciousness. We are trying to plant a seed of mindfulness awareness. So every time you come back, you're planting beginning to develop the habit or the memory of coming back, which is totally antithetical to samsara. And you're planting that in the alaya. And more, the more you do it, the more you can remember to come back. I remember in the beginning, years ago when I was a practitioner, we used to write things on our hands to try and remember to come back. I remember I got these orange circular stickers at the office supply store. Orange is the color of the Kagyu sect. And I put them on my telephone, on my gear shift, on my coffee cup, to try and remind me. After a while, you stop seeing them. And you just keep dreaming. But we used to, come up with these little devices. But after a while, if you practice, especially if you have a daily practice, a regular daily practice, it plants this seed of the habit of beginning to wake up, of remembering to wake up, to come back. He says we develop the habit, the instinct to go for sanity, awake, mindfulness. Whenever there is a gap at that moment, the point is to be fully mindful. Look at yourself. You don't need a technique. Just be present, be mindful, just be here. Just be there, he says. If you cannot be there, you can follow your breath in order to be there, which is a gentle way of doing so. So you can use the breath, because when the breath comes out, when you sense it coming out of your nostrils, this is the place to be aware of the breath, right here. You breathe out. You can feel it as it leaves your nostrils. It only happens in the present. It brings you back. Then he says something which I highlighted and I can't read it. You don't need to work harder to feel or perceive more than usual. Rather, and then this is a wild one, mindfulness is extra bliss. It is something joyful. You realize that you could be uplifted by being mindful, that this world is a beautiful, clear, open dimension. You begin to feel very good that you could sense beyond your regular, ordinary struggles, when you don't require awareness, but give you which don't require awareness, but give you tremendous pain, misery, and mindlessness. When renunciation, there's this term renunciation. We hear this associated with religion, especially yogis or renunciates. They give up food and wealth and sex and all this stuff. But the real meaning of renunciation is to give up those habitual stories of I and other. That's the hardest part. Because those stories are always about all our neurotic fears and hopes. Money, sex, health, love, loneliness, all of those are contained in that. And that's the real renunciation. And he says, when renunciation is planted as a habitual pattern in your alaya consciousness, as part of the fundamental mindfulness process, your experience becomes fundamentally good. You begin to feel very soothed by mindfulness. Isn't that interesting? Soothed. And then he says, mindfulness is the way to appreciate life. Without mindfulness, you miss lots of things because you're lost in thought, right? Miss the quality of the day and what's going on in the street and all that stuff. And then finally, see, there's a thing that we talk about a lot, developing Maitri. Maitri is loving kindness. Maitri for other people, but especially the hardest one, is Maitri for yourself. Loving kindness for yourself. And Tibetans look at Americans and they say, Americans in particular need to develop loving kindness because Americans are very, very hard on themselves, Westerners. There's a lot of self-hatred, a lot of self-doubt. Trungpa Rinpoche said, self-doubt is the Buddhist version of original sin. It's the sin from which all others spring.
Germans?
Yeah. What?
I mean the Germans too.
I'm sorry?
I mean the Germans are also hard on themselves.
You think Germans are harder on themselves? Really? Well, let's say Westerners, okay? And it is really Westerners that the Tibetans look at. It's a particular sort of our disease. Everybody's got theirs. The Tibetans, Rinpoche used to say, the Tibetan problem is they're so sly. That's what Rinpoche used to say about Tibetans. They're stupid in their slyness. You know, they're sort of, anyhow, scheming. And they regard Americans and Westerners as being very naive, sort of gullible. So, in order to be good to yourself, to begin to develop Maitri for yourself, which is so important, because you can't be kind to others until you're kind to yourself. And the way to do it is with mindfulness. Coming back to this present moment, beginning to enjoy, to see the beauty of this world seen clearly in its vividness, colorfulness, immediacy, power, meaningfulness, that it's communicating to us all the time. That extraordinary pleasure of cutting through preconceptions that we have about each other. So the world is beautified. And finally, I'll just close with this. You might think that your mindfulness practice is not working, but that doesn't really matter, as long as you continue to cut karmic roots through sitting practice. See, when you sit, every time you come present, you're cutting the chain of karma. And it doesn't mean that you have to be present to this. It might mean that you're suddenly seeing your thoughts. Because there are two ways to have thoughts. The first way is you're lost in them. We're just thinking, you know. It's like being lost in a movie or a TV show. You forget that you're even watching it. You're so involved with it. The second way to have thoughts is you see that you're thinking. And when you see you're thinking, you have woken up. You're back. So that's the way you practice. That's the way you cut the karmic root, is just simply by seeing the thought, by coming out of it and acknowledging it. You don't have to do a thing to it. And in fact, if you try to do something to it, that's going to be another self-improvement project, and you're back in samsara. So you just acknowledge it. You just see it clearly. You can cut a lot of roots in 1 hour of meditation, he says. Every time you realize you're thinking, you're cutting a root. And after years of practice, eventually, you no longer have a samsaric occupation to uphold. Therefore, sitting practice is regarded as very precious and important. So we could have a discussion. What's your name? We met.
My name is Lisa, and I saw you last week.
Huh? You saw me last week?
I was here last week. I was your partner last week.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry, Lisa.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of people.
Wait, here we're going to pass the mic. Is it working? Yeah.
Hello? Oh, is it working? Okay.
Joe, could you turn up the volume on that? That flashing green light, the second one? Just a little bit. That's it. And there should be green on the bottom there. Yeah. That's good.
So my question is,
Hold it up to your mouth. Sorry.
Yes.
Whoa.
Okay. Lately, I'm getting a challenge of having a lot of people close to me in my life are going through a lot of hard times. Recently, I've been able to just kind of accept mine and embrace it. But now on where I'm at is kind of passing that on.
It's kind of what?
Passing that on, being able to accept what is and to try to stop that chain. And I know everybody kind of does it in a little bit different way. But right now, the only way I kind of know how is to just try to kind of set an example. But sometimes it's hard to make that approachable to somebody who maybe has chronic depression, or somebody whose mother just died, or somebody who has very big financial troubles, or whatever they're ill, I'm kind of evolving at this point where I feel like I'm getting good, but now I got to pass that on. And how would you recommend that we do that? You know, I mean, I know to try to set the example, but other than that, is there any things we can do to try to break through, or summarize what you just said there? Because I think it's exactly what you just said, but how might you do it more simply or non-obviously or something?
Of course, there are always practical things that one can do, you know, to help other people, depending on the circumstance and situation. But the main thing that we can do to help others is to be mindful, is to be present, to be simply present and cheerful about our lives, you know, just to be here, to drop our own particular preconceptions and to be awake and here. And that is worth gold. I have a close friend who has a mentally disturbed child, and she has been dealing with this for years. This child is institutionalized and off and on, in and out, and is a constant risk. And she has come to the point where, you know, there's a lot of practical things she can do for this child, you know, arrange for treatments and living situations and all that. But the main thing that she practices is to be present and mindful and cheerful for this child, and not to devolve into her own preconceptions and stories. It's profound to wake up like that for people. But that doesn't mean you don't do all the practical things necessary as well.
Hello.
Pia.
Yes, I do have a questions about the 6 realms.
About what?
The 6 realms.
Realms.
Yeah. So you saying that we are going through these 6 realms, but I always thought that the realms, like for example the hell realm, that we don't see the hell realm.
We don't see it.
That it's like an invisible being. For example, that for us water is water, and for this hell being water is pus. So I'm just wondering, because I really like this idea that we are the 6 realms, that we are really going through this. I mean, I really can relate to this. So, but what is this idea that we can see these beings, that they're actually around us, and that we have to pray for them as well?
Mm-hmm.
So how does that bind in? Is this something, it's that the mental state you are talking about, that there exist? I mean,
well, the teachings say that these realms do actually exist, and that yes, most human beings, not all, but most, can't see them. And so, for instance, supposedly there are hungry ghosts up in the corner up there of the room, living in a whole little world, and they're as oblivious of us as we are of them, you know, that kind of thing. And the only realms that human beings particularly see are the human and the animal realm, in terms of that first level and what you're born into. But you know, whether you believe that or not, I think the other 2 versions of the realms as psychological portraits, you know, which are ongoing through your life, like you're a human being and you may have the mentality of a god, you know, or it might be a mentality of a human being. And that's very useful to understand, because there are people you'll meet whose mentality is characterized in the style of a realm. And then that momentary thing that you experience throughout the day, you experience the realms. But yeah, you know, whether you believe it or not, it doesn't really matter. I mean, you know, I don't think it...
And one more question. What is it when we are actually, when we just extremely mindful right now? If that would be the case, in which realm would we be?
None.
We would be in nirvana?
You're not in any realms. You've stepped out of the realms.
Okay.
If the moment that you become completely mindful, you're just totally present, without mentation going on, the realms have evaporated. That's why it's cutting the root. That is the way in which we get free, is by constantly coming back. And they say that, you see, he started out this chapter talking about the virtue of the Hinayana level of the path, which is what we're at here, is that it produces individual salvation. That's my salvation. It's called sosotarpa in Tibetan. And what individual salvation really means is that we become free of the I-other dilemmas that are embodied in the realms, that are described in the realms. And that's the freedom from suffering. We cease to suffer in that crude way. Now, it isn't full enlightenment. In order for that to happen, we have to begin to want to help other people and go beyond our own personal salvation. But still, it's a very powerful and important first step. Cutting through, they call it the 1.5-fold egolessness. You're cutting through the belief in I and part of other. We won't go into that at this point. But you're basically cutting the belief in I. It's not so much that you really begin to realize that all I is, this I, is a story we tell ourselves from time to time. Often those time to times are pretty continuous, but still, they have beginnings and end. I hope, I fear, I want, I wish.
I just wanted to comment on the realms in terms of how Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche spoke of them, which I think is unusual, because usually when we think of realms, we think of a rebirth in a certain realm. But Rinpoche said that we experience these 6 realms constantly from moment to moment. It isn't particularly that we have to wait till we die to go into another realm. We're constantly experiencing all the realms over and over again. So that was it's an unusual way that he taught about the realms.
Mm-hmm. Here, pass it to Joe.
So basically, we are in the human realm.
Yes.
But is it possible that we are encountering people that are in a helm realm? In the helm realm?
In human bodies, you mean?
In human bodies?
Oh, yeah. You see them on the street.
So it's...
Especially in New York.
When you talk about hungry ghost realms up there, I could think of people in hungry ghost realms that I've encountered in my life.
Yes.
So they're not necessarily invisible in it up there.
No. I mean, you can be reborn into the hungry ghost realm and then you're invisible up there. But there are human beings who have the mentality.
Sounds like a terrible place to be reborn into.
Yeah, well, it is. Hungry ghosts, there are many styles of being a hungry ghost, actually. But the classic one is a being that has an enormous belly, a tiny neck, and a teeny mouth. So it's constantly hungry because it's got this enormous belly, but it can only manage to consume 1 grain of rice or 1 drop of liquid at a time.
So these are basically, for lack of a better word, various demons that we're all capable of being.
Yeah, but as a human being, I mean, I remember having a friend in college, and we all felt this way about him, that whenever he was around, he felt hungry. He felt like he was wanting, sort of sucking up, wanting our friendship, as though he didn't have it, you know? It's a hungry ghost. He imagined that he was poor, and that we had wealth that we could give to him, our friendship, you know? You've met people like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's a style of hungry ghost.
Yeah. And is it possible, it's you know, the Western version of that would be psychology for people that you run into. So is it possible for people to come out of that realm?
Sure. In fact, they will, inevitably. Yeah. You know, I mean, maybe in this lifetime, but if you believe in multiple lifetimes,
hopefully in this lifetime and not bring it on to another one yet.
The chances are good in this lifetime that you won't stay in one mentality throughout your whole life, although it's possible.
Yeah.
but people tend to cycle. And then if you take the first interpretation of the realms, we're human beings, your cat is an animal, then they say that beings, sentient beings, see, we're all sentient beings, that's what we are, they inhabit the realms, circle endlessly through these realms, one after the next, until they achieve enlightenment. Now, interestingly, too, each realm has its own Buddha. The human realm, the Buddha was Shakyamuni, the most recent one, who comes and appears. And they say that the reason that is so, and you see them in some of the versions of the Wheel of Life, you'll see that it's divided up into 6 sections, right? Each one is one of the 6 realms. And each section at the outer edge has the picture of a Muni, that means a sage. And the idea is that each mentality calls forth what the wisdom that it needs in order to get free. So each one of us finds what we need. According to, in the language they say, according to our needs and obscurations, we pick the teachers, we find the path that works for us. And that's what's happening in all the realms. Each realm calls forth its own Buddha, according to its style.
The desire of this endless hunger of money for the Wall Street guy, or you talked about the fame in Hollywood, or the technology wealth in Silicon Valley. The more enlightened one becomes, supposedly, the less these desires are there. And is that the whole feeling? Is that the whole theory? I'm new to the whole Buddhism movement and understanding. I haven't done any of the readings yet.
Yeah.
But is that, I have a Buddha belly though. And so I'm just trying to understand, because I get a little hungry with food. But I'm just trying to understand, is that to be enlightened is to feel as though, although you talked about all those things on the wheel of the desire wheel, I guess, I missed that. But you talked about that woman who felt, which was just totally in her own mind. That was in her mind that some people don't want to have children.
Right. Absolutely.
I'm not saying I'm one of them, but I'm saying I'd like to have children one day. But I'm saying there are some people, but in her mind she felt that was an inadequacy.
Mm-hmm.
When she went
and
to
that's suffering.
When she went to the party and so my question is enlightenment in one form feeling that you are now okay with not feeling that you have to desire things of the earth? Is that what part of enlightenment is?
All of these realms are stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves, in which we are a hero or a heroine, and we are either successful or we're unsuccessful, we are at risk, all kinds of things. It's the perils of Pauline, it's a fraud. It's like a TV drama. You're on your edge of your seat. Is the hero or the heroine going to win? They're going to get what they want. They're stories. What enlightenment is, I guess, is switching one's allegiance from the stories to reality, this reality as it arises only in the present moment. In fact, you can't even call this the present moment, because then it's in relation to the past.
So being Zen, or in the moment.
It's a matter of understanding what's real and what isn't. We think it's very real. I got to worry about my rent. I've got to worry about my belly. I've got to worry about
No, beyond those things though, because those things are human existence. You got to pay your rent, but there's only so many millions of dollars you need to have, and I mean that's what they talk about in levels of happiness.
Right.
So when you're making, you talked about in the beginning of this whole speech tonight, you talked about this in Wall Street. I work on Wall Street, but you talked about this insatiable money, or if it's in Hollywood, and I work with some actors who are famous, and the insatiable need to be famous. But these are things that aren't needed.
I used to hang out with a lot of poets. Talk about ego.
I knew Mark Strand. Do you know? Did you know Mark?
No.
Do you know the name?
No.
But when you but there's human existence to pay the rent, and then there's
Right.
wanting to keep up with the guy who just got the newest car and
Right.
or whatever. So, but I would assume enlightenment is being able to let go of those kind of things, or it's not that. It's more about being in the present.
It's about being in the present, and in the present, you know that you have to pay the rent, but you don't obsess about it. You just do it.
Oh, I see.
But when you're obsessing about it, and worrying about it, and worrying about me, and is my apartment, going to be?
Is my apartment big enough?
Yeah, and are people going to be impressed by my apartment?
Right, that superficial
Whatever.
thing.
I mean, it's just a matter of the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. I mean, it's one thing, an enlightened person still has to take care of all the practical necessities of life. They have to eat and pay the rent and.
Right, but once you get past that, does the enlightened person feel that they have to be a show-off?
Hardly, I wouldn't think.
Right.
Something that seems like one particular kind of neurosis.
That's not an enlightened person.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Now, a reverse of that be an enlightened person wouldn't feel that they have to hide their light under a basket either, a bushel.
Right.
That they have to be falsely modest. They would just do what's appropriate. What's helpful for other people. That's one of the things they say about the enlightened state of mind. It's endlessly loving. It's endlessly concerned about others. There's nothing else to do. When you begin to give up your own concern for yourself, then you start to look out and you see all this suffering, and all that there is to do is to help other people, be free from suffering. They say there are 3 gifts that Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, those are enlightened beings, can give to others. The first is the gift of material benefit, like food, wealth, support. The second is the gift of relief from fear. That's a big one. And the third is the gift of the teachings that free you fundamentally and forever from sorrow and fear and suffering. Those 3 increasing levels of gift. And Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are endlessly inspired. It's like they're in love with the world. There's nothing else, because they've sort of ceased to be concerned for themselves, so they are in constant responsiveness to the world. They say that Buddhas enact the 4 actions. They're called the 4 karmas. But it's not karma in a different sense. The literal meaning of karma at its root is action. Okay, so we're not talking about the karmic chain now. And the 4 enlightened actions are that Buddhas perform, enlightened people, enlightened sages, is they are constantly relieving of the suffering of others in 4 ways. The first way, and the easiest way, is through promoting understanding. Understanding cuts through problems, right? And resolves conflicts. If that doesn't work, the second karma, the second enlightened action, is through enrichment, through giving, through generosity. The third, if that doesn't work, is magnetizing, seduction. You seduce the conflict, and you can achieve a kind of a resolution. And then the last one, and the last... Huh? Well, it's like, you magnetize the and enchant the people who are in conflict, and so they forget their conflict and they begin to fall in love with you, with each other.
But that's manipulative.
Huh? Can you explain it, Lisa?
It's like a teacher, like
Here.
I mean, like as a teacher, like all of a sudden you'll get these little kids that get up and they want to teach just because they're able to. Just like I'm just here, I'm listening to you, and now I'm able to kind of get a little bit of a grasp. When you were saying like can you just say it, just so I can focus a little bit more? In trance, to basically, let's say you want to get somebody to
hold the mic up, right?
Let's say you want somebody to study for a test and to do well in school, like a lot of people want them to do. Well, how can you get them to want to do that? And sometimes you'll just come from so many different avenues, but the magic or the beauty is when all of a sudden they forget about the prize or the motivation. They just feel so great that they've did it and they're so excited. So it's that process of getting people to really want, inspiring and motivating them, but in so many, it could be out of the box. It can be in so many different ways.
That's terrific.
You know.
That's terrific. I mean, in the traditional teachings, we're going to get pretty wild here. No, I shouldn't go there, should I? Alan's saying no. Don't forget it. Not for publication. And the final way, the fourth action, is you enlighten people by destroying, with acts of destruction. And it's the last resort. And when a person achieves enlightenment, they say that the first three come very rapidly, in the first three karmas. The fourth is the last to come, because it's the most difficult to employ. Destroying?
What would be an example of that?
Well, Padmasambhava, the great sage who brought Buddhism to Tibet, he killed people because he knew that they would be reborn further along down the path. He could see it with his prescience. Sometimes, or I'll give you a better example, Trungpa Rinpoche, my teacher, rarely, but did, throw people out of the community. There are a couple of people I can think of that he expelled.
Twice.
Huh?
2 times.
2 times?
Why would they expel?
Because they simply weren't able to hear what he was teaching without distorting it, twisting it, turning it into something that was not good, something mean, something evil, something neurotic. And the only way that he could get through to them was to completely throw them out. And in fact, he did it with one. I don't know, you might know him. And the guy came back and eventually and became a contributing member.
And the other one was banished forever.
Huh?
The other one was banished forever.
I don't think he ever banished anybody forever. I just don't know what happened with the other one that I know of. I never saw him again. I'm sorry, Alan wants to say something. Oh, Joe, go ahead, Joe.
Just briefly to go back to the realms. So a truly enlightened person can be living this lavish lifestyle with all this luxury around them.
Mm-hmm.
But if they are truly enlightened and they were to lose that, it's not their world.
No.
So it would not really make a big difference.
Right.
And the next thing I want to say is, how many realms would you say Trump is in right now?
I have no idea. I mean,
Is the god?
it's just
he's a hungry ghost.
What?
He's a god. He's a hungry ghost. He's got all these things going on.
I think he does. I think he's got a lot of stuff.
But in fair honesty,
Huh?
do any of us really know him? In fair honesty, I mean, there's so much propaganda.
Going by his behavior and what he says, with what we're presented with.
It'd be fun. It's fun to speculate, isn't it?
Well, it struck me that an example of destroying would be, for example, if you had, like in psychology, when you have a client who's fighting addiction, and there are whole varieties of approaches you can bring to that. You know, but you have to say, I will treat you, I will help you, but you must give up doing what you're doing.
You have to give up.
You
what?
must give up doing what you're doing, whether it's literal substance abuse or anything. And when the person refuses to do that, the destruction would be just to cut the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or having a friend who will continue to, let's say, complain bitterly about one thing and again and again and again, and you do your best to help. You know, you go through all the kinds of strategies that you are aware of in good faith, and then at a certain point, you've got to just cut it.
You do.
Yeah, it's very painful for both people, obviously, but you've just got to cut it.
Yeah.
They may or may not come back.
Yeah, it's true.
You just do what you have to do in that case.
Yeah, I can.
Huh?
Huh?
A Noah's Ark kind of example.
A Noah's Ark?
Destruction. Like, I'm trying to think of a real example of the realm of destruction.
I think what Alan gave is very is a really good example. I mean, I remember I had a friend who was alcoholic, and I had another friend who was a brilliant psychoanalyst, Lou Ormont. And Lou said of my friend Johnny, who's now dead, he said, you have to tell him, he said, when you're sober, you're my friend. When you're drunk, you're not. I don't want to know you. And he said, otherwise, you're just enabling him. And it was a big message for me at the time. You know, he was a very dear friend, but God, he was so self-destructive. And there's just no way to stop it. There was no way to stop him. You know. And so I threw him out. You know. And he went through what he had to go through. And then he came back and stayed with me again, and he was a drug addict and every damn thing. And he eventually died, young.
Who was this?
A friend of mine, who you wouldn't know, but he was a young guy. I met him when he was...
And he never got treatment?
Treatment, holy mackerel. His family was wealthy, very wealthy. And he was alcoholic, he was a drug addict. He was...
How old was he when he passed?
57, and I don't know why he passed. He had left... when the last time he left my house, and he stayed with me off and on over the years, many times.
Did he ever marry and have a family?
No. But he, when I left, I thought he was clean when he left, you know, and then afterwards I was cleaning do you know what I'm talking about, Marcel? And I left and I found burnt spoons under the bed. The guy was incorrigible. But he was a beautiful person. I loved him very much.
I kind of think that kind of comes very close to home with me. I have a lot of alcoholism in my family, and it's hit home. It was developed from guilt of very bad things very, very young, and then they start out self-medicating, but then I think they just think they don't deserve to be happy, and they just can't break that cycle of negative thoughts, you know, and that's the mystery, how to have somebody who's like that and be able to get to their mind or their soul enough where they can have the power to deal with it physically, or to get help, or to motivate, or whatever. I mean, it's a lot of people are able to do it and get help, and a lot of people are not able to do it. But
yeah, it's powerful.
It's very prevalent in a lot of different forms.
Indeed. So the whole idea of this path is to wake up from the dreams, and that means switching your allegiance. Trungpa Rinpoche said you switch your allegiance from samsara to nirvana. And what that means is switching one's allegiance from the thoughts that inhabit our brains, those stories that we tell ourselves, to this, to what's going on right now in the present moment, full of life and color and meaningfulness. And I'll tell you, here's a hard one. In the last volume of The Profound Treasury of Ocean of Dharma, page 400, he goes on and on and on about how you don't need thought. You don't need thought. The only purpose of thought is to prove that I'm here, me and my problems, me and my virtues. And that's it. And in thought lies suffering. And you don't need it. You can just simply come back to this awake moment in the present and deal with your life just beautifully. In fact, better.
Is that kind of like a faith?
Huh?
Is that kind of like faith? Like not questioning?
No, it's waking up. There's no faith in Buddhism. There's no blind faith. whatsoever. You're asked not to have blind faith. It got to be a conviction that comes from practice, from constantly seeing your thoughts, realizing you were lost in dream, coming back to the present, and at some point your allegiance starts to shift, and you begin to shift your loyalty.
Well, the word faith actually is used, but it's, as John indicated, it's not the kind of...
I didn't mean in a religious sense.
Yes.
In a sense of like the universe and just kind of accepting what is, and just not seeing it as a negative thing. It's just the way it is, and not to argue it, or not to debate it, or not to pity it, or not to think great about it. Just to, be in the moment. Like you're saying, like kind of like just accept,
I think it's beyond acceptance.
Not questioning, not having that rambling going on and on and on and on. Just kind of like, just being okay with just quietness and being okay with that.
Well, I wasn't using faith in a religious sense, but faith is used more as a synonym for confidence. That, well, there's the faith, and you have a kind of trust in your teacher that there's something real and genuine to what they're saying, and then as you begin to practice, your experience tells you there's something real and genuine going on. So it's the faith / confidence that being in the present, in the real world, having the experience where you're not being seduced by your dreams or your fantasies is the way to live a meaningful life. So that kind of faith, I know it's being said because I've experienced this on and off throughout my life, and it's real and true. So in that sense, it's faith. It's faith based on experience rather than you've got to believe that this is happening because that's part of the deal. You've got to believe it. It's not just faith based on belief. Yes, it's belief in the reality of your experience, that it's true. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. That was great, Alan.
I think that one of the most important things when we're practicing or when we're not practicing, when fear arises or anxiety arises, open, spacious, and relaxed. Open to whatever's going on. Spacious, there's always space in our mind and space in the environment. And relaxed, and we relax within that. Open, spacious, and relaxed. Khenpo Tsultrim Gyamtso Rinpoche, the teacher that's on the wall right there, he always says that. Relax. Open, spacious, and relax. And there's so much anxiety all the time, even when we're practicing, that this is, for me, open, spacious, and relax just calms my nerves. Because it's space.
It makes sense.
It's open. It's relaxed. And then whatever happens in that space.
Well, on that note, we could open, end, and relax. So, we like to say the dedication of merit. This is the idea that we aspire to become Buddhas who are endlessly concerned with the benefit of others. And so we dedicate the benefit that we've achieved here tonight. It's called the twofold benefit, the benefit of self and others. And if you don't have to read this, if you feel if it doesn't inspire you, and those of us who it inspires will. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy of wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great East, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant